Hey everyone, my name is Jake, I'm 26 years old, and I'm from Brazil. But just 5 months ago, I couldn't speak a single full sentence in English, not even something as simple as, "How are you?" without stopping to think. I was completely lost. Today, I want to tell you how I learned English in just 5 months, without any expensive classes, without traveling to an English-speaking country, and without wasting my time on useless methods. But this isn't just my story. This is your story too. If you've ever felt frustrated, stuck, or embarrassed because of your English, keep listening, because I was exactly where you are right now. And I promise you this, if you listen to my full journey step by step, you will know exactly how to improve your English. This isn't magic, and it isn't talent. It's a system, a method that works, a journey that transformed my life. And if you follow it, it can transform yours too. So let's go back to the beginning, because my journey didn't start with motivation. It started with failure. A failure so big that it changed everything for me. For as long as I can remember, I dreamed of working for an international company. My ultimate goal was to be a software engineer at a big tech firm in the US. I loved coding. I was good at it. I worked day and night, refining my skills, improving my projects, and mastering every technical concept I could. I told myself that if I became the best in my field, opportunities would come. And then, after years of relentless effort, my chance finally arrived. One day, I received an email from a top US tech company, a company I had always admired. The subject line made my heart race. "Congratulations. You've been selected for an interview." I couldn't believe it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I pictured myself working in a high-rise office, surrounded by the best engineers in the world, earning a great salary, and living in a new country. It felt like everything I had worked for was finally coming together. I was nervous, of course, but I was also confident in my skills. After all, I knew coding inside out. So I prepared my resume, reviewed common interview questions, and got ready for the biggest opportunity of my life. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. The day of the interview arrived. I opened Zoom, my palms slightly sweaty, but my determination stronger than ever. And then I saw them, 3 interviewers, all native English speakers. The moment they started talking, it felt like someone had pressed the fast-forward button on their voices. Their words blurred together into an indecipherable mess of sounds. My heart pounded. I strained to understand, but my brain just couldn't process the words fast enough. Then came the first question. "Jake, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your experience in software development?" A simple question, one I knew the answer to better than anyone. But my mind went to blank. I panicked. I could hear the words in my head, but my mouth wouldn't cooperate. After a few painful seconds, I stammered, Yes, I am, software. I do coding. Many projects. Good. I am very good." Silence. The interviewers looked at me, their expressions unreadable. The silence felt like a knife in my stomach. They moved on to the next question, but it didn't matter. I was already drowning. I knew the answers, but the words just wouldn't come. In the end, one of them smiled politely and said, "All right, Jake, thank you for your time." I knew what that meant. I had failed, not because I lacked technical skills, not because I wasn't intelligent or capable, but because I couldn't speak English. That day, I realized something that changed my life forever. English wasn't just a language, it was the key to my dreams. And right now, I didn't have that key. I felt ashamed, embarrassed, angry at myself. For years, I had told myself that I didn't need English, that if I was great at coding, my skills would speak for themselves. But now, I saw the truth. Without English, I was invisible. That night, I made a decision. I would learn English, and I would learn it fast. Most people, when they decide to learn English, immediately sign up for expensive courses. But I didn't do that. Why? Because I had already tried them before, and they didn't work. A year ago, I paid for an online English class. The teacher made me memorize vocabulary lists, do grammar exercises, and study boring rules. I followed the lessons, did the homework, and hoped for the best. But after 3 months, when I tried to have a conversation, I still couldn't speak. I realized that expensive courses were not the answer. If I wanted to learn English fast, I needed a different approach, a system that actually worked. And that's when I developed my 5-month method, a method that I'm going to share with you right now, step by step. Part 1. The first 15 days. The biggest mistake beginners make is thinking they need more words. I thought the same thing. I believed that if I memorized 1,000 new words, I would magically become fluent. But the truth was, I already knew hundreds of English words, and I still couldn't speak. So for the first 15 days, I didn't study any new words. Instead, I focused on something much more powerful, learning how to use the words I already knew. Here's exactly what I did. First, I created a survival sentence list. I sat down and thought, what do I actually need to say in daily life? I wrote 50 simple sentences that I needed in real conversations. Sentences like, "Hi, how are you? Can you repeat that? I don't understand. I am learning English. I need a coffee, please." Then every morning, I read these 50 sentences out loud. Not once, not twice, but 10 times. At first, my tongue felt slow, my pronunciation awkward. But after just 5 days, something incredible happened. These sentences became automatic. They rolled off my tongue without hesitation. Next, I started speaking to myself in English every single day. This is one of the most powerful things I did. Whenever I was alone, I spoke in English. In the shower, I said, "I am taking a shower. The water is hot. I feel relaxed." When I made breakfast, I said, "I am making eggs. I like eggs. They are easy to cook." At first, it felt ridiculous. I was talking to myself like a crazy person. But then I realized something. This was my private classroom. No one could hear me. No one could judge me. And in just 1 week, my brain started thinking in English. Finally, I practiced 5 sentences a day, but with a twist. I didn't just read them. I copied them exactly, repeating them 10 times with the same emotion, speed, and pronunciation as native speakers. If I heard a character in a movie say, "I don't know what you're talking about," I repeated it exactly the same way. At first, it was difficult, but after a few days, my pronunciation started sounding more natural. By the end of the first 15 days, something incredible had happened. I stopped translating in my head. I could say basic sentences without thinking. I felt more confident. But this was just the beginning, because after 15 days, the real practice began. At the end of my first 15 days, I had already started to see changes that I never thought were possible. For the first time in my life, I could say basic sentences without translating in my head. My tongue felt faster, my words came more naturally, and my confidence, something I had completely lost after my disastrous interview, began to return. But I knew that this was only the beginning. If I wanted to become truly fluent in English within 5 months, I had to go beyond the basics. I had to immerse myself so deeply in the language that English would no longer feel like something foreign or separate from my life. It had to become a part of me. And so, as I entered the second phase of my journey, I made one of the most important decisions of my learning process. I would make English my default language in everything I did, every single day, no matter what. This decision changed everything. Up until this point, English had been something I studied, a separate activity that I had to set time aside for. But now, I changed my entire approach. I stopped studying English, and instead, I started living in English. The first step was switching my entire digital world to English. My phone, my laptop, my social media, every single app I used, I changed them all to English. At first, it was disorienting. I was so used to seeing everything in Portuguese that suddenly being surrounded by English felt overwhelming. But that discomfort was exactly what I needed. I forced my brain to adapt. Every time I wanted to do something simple, like adjust my settings or reply to a message, I had to process English words naturally. Within days, I started recognizing common words and phrases without even thinking about them. My brain was learning English passively, even when I wasn't actively studying. But I didn't stop there. I also changed my entire entertainment world to English. I made a rule: no more movies, shows, or music in Portuguese. If I wanted to relax, I had to do it in English. At first, this was frustrating. Watching movies in English without subtitles felt like running a marathon with no training. I understood maybe 30% of what was being said. The words moved too fast, the accents were unfamiliar, and I felt lost, but I refused to give up. I told myself, it doesn't matter if I only understand a few words, my brain is learning. So I kept watching, kept listening, kept exposing myself to real English every single day. Then something incredible happened. Around week 4, I noticed a shift. One day I was watching a show, and suddenly I realized I had understood an entire sentence I didn't have to translate. The meaning just appeared in my mind, as naturally as if I were hearing Portuguese. It was a small moment, but it was proof that my method was working. My brain was starting to absorb English like a native speaker. Encouraged by this progress, I took things even further. I started reading in English every single day. But I didn't make the mistake most learners make. I didn't choose difficult, complicated books. I knew that if I picked something too advanced, I would get frustrated and quit. So instead, I found books that were just slightly above my current level. Simple, engaging stories that I actually enjoyed. And here's the key. I didn't stop to look up every word I didn't know. Instead, I trained myself to guess the meaning from context. This was difficult at first, but over time, my reading speed improved dramatically. My brain learned to recognize patterns, predict meanings, and understand full sentences without needing to translate. By the end of the second month, I could read entire pages without stopping. My vocabulary had exploded, not because I was memorizing lists, but because I was learning words naturally, the same way children do when they learn their first language. but reading and listening weren't enough. If I wanted to truly master English, I needed to speak. And not just to myself. I needed real conversations with real people. This was terrifying. The memory of my failed interview was still fresh in my mind. I was afraid of making mistakes, of embarrassing myself, of being judged for my bad grammar and pronunciation. But I had learned something important over the past 2 months. Fear is the enemy of progress. So I pushed myself out of my comfort zone. I joined online communities where people were learning English, and I started messaging strangers. At first, I only typed. Then I moved to voice messages. And finally, after weeks of building my confidence, I had my first real conversation in English over a video call. It was nerve-wracking. My heart pounded. I stumbled over words. I no longer felt like I was studying English. I felt like I was living in it, thinking in it, and embracing it as a natural extension of myself. In the weeks that followed, I reflected deeply on everything I had learned during this journey. And one of the most important lessons I realized was that fluency is not an endpoint. It's a continuous process. Just because I had reached a level where I could communicate confidently didn't mean that I had nothing left to learn. In fact, the opposite was true. The more I improved, the more I saw how much deeper the language went. There were still subtle nuances, cultural references, and advanced vocabulary that I hadn't fully mastered. But instead of feeling discouraged, I felt excited. For the first time in my life, learning English wasn't a chore or an obligation. It was something I genuinely enjoyed. Every new phrase I learned, every idiom I discovered, and every moment of effortless understanding felt like unlocking a new level in a game that I never wanted to stop playing. As I started my new job, I quickly realized just how much my hard work had paid off. Unlike my first disastrous interview, where I could barely form a complete sentence under pressure, I now found myself able to communicate effectively with my colleagues. Meetings that once would have terrified me became opportunities to contribute and share my ideas. I no longer had to sit in silence, afraid that I would embarrass myself if I spoke up. Instead, I participated actively, asked questions, and even cracked jokes in English, a level of confidence I never thought I would reach. But what struck me the most was the change in how others perceived me. When I first joined the company, I assumed that my coworkers would instantly recognize me as a non-native speaker and judge me for any mistakes I made. But to my surprise, many of them didn't even notice. In fact, on several occasions, I had colleagues tell me that they had assumed English was my first language simply because of how naturally I spoke. It was in those moments that I truly understood what fluency meant. It wasn't about speaking perfectly, it was about speaking naturally. And the only way to reach that level was through real-world practice, immersion, and a mindset that embraced mistakes as part of the learning process. But while my professional life had reached new heights, something even more remarkable was happening in my personal life. The deeper I immersed myself in English, the more my entire world expanded. I started connecting with people from different countries, cultures, and backgrounds in ways I never could have before. Suddenly, I had access to an entire universe of ideas, perspectives, and experiences that had previously been locked behind a language barrier. I found myself making friends with people from the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and even non-native speakers from countries like Germany, Japan, and Brazil, who were also using English as a bridge to communicate. These conversations weren't just about language practice, they were about human connection. And for the first time, I understood that learning English wasn't just about job opportunities or travel. It was about being able to engage with the world on a much deeper level. One of the most unexpected yet rewarding aspects of my journey was the realization that I now had the ability to help others who were struggling with the same fears and doubts that I had once faced. Whenever I met someone who was hesitant to speak English because they were afraid of making mistakes, I could see myself in them, the old version of me who had let fear hold him back. And so, I started sharing my story, encouraging others to push past their insecurities and embrace the learning process. I told them what I had learned, that fluency is not about perfection, but about perseverance, that the key to speaking confidently is not avoiding mistakes, but embracing them as stepping stones to improvement, that immersion, consistency, and real conversations are far more powerful than memorizing grammar rules in isolation. And above all, that anyone, absolutely anyone, can achieve fluency if they commit to the process and refuse to give up. Looking back now, I realize just how much this journey has changed me, not just as an English learner, but as a person. I started this process thinking that I was simply learning a new language, but in reality, I was learning so much more. I was learning resilience, discipline, and the power of stepping outside my comfort zone. I was learning how to face challenges head-on, how to embrace failure as part of growth, and how to trust in my ability to improve. These lessons didn't just apply to English, they applied to every aspect of my life. And that, more than anything, is why I believe that learning a language is one of the most valuable things anyone can do. Because it's not just about communication, it's about transformation. Now, as I continue my journey, I no longer see English as a barrier that I need to overcome. Instead, I see it as a door that has opened up endless possibilities. I know that there will always be more to learn, new words to discover, and ways to refine my skills. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, I feel excited, because I now understand that fluency isn't a destination, it's a lifelong adventure. And for anyone who is just starting their own journey, my message is this: don't let fear hold you back. Don't let doubt convince you that you're not capable. Because if I, a person who once froze in terror at the thought of speaking English, could achieve fluency in just 5 months, then so can you. The key is not to wait for the perfect moment, the perfect course, or the perfect conditions. The key is to start, to keep going, and to trust that every step you take brings you closer to success. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll look back and see just how far you've come.